If you want to fight a war, then you should actually try to win that war. To win a war, you need a theory of victory. And right now, we are seeing a big disagreement about that in Ukraine. So pick up the phone, because today's messy geopolitics helpline is about to get started. What, in your opinion, is more likely to play a major part in the final negotiations between Russia and Ukraine? Internal struggles on either side, or battlefield gains? Between Russia allegedly preparing border closings for another round of mobilization, and the sheer endless pockets of NATO, if they choose to open them, that is, both sides seem to have the resources for plenty of years of war to come. No one is done! With the front being as entrenched as it is, it seems to me that the most likely source of major changes in bargaining power, which might then end the war, must come from internal power struggles on either side. And to play devil's advocate, if that's the case, why are we still bothering with interpreting small developments that can change at a month's notice? I am going to start out the answer to today's question by completely removing any hesitation and saying that it is both. Obviously, my reasoning here is because I actually think that the underlying tension tells us something about the war itself. I will get to the competing theories of victory for Ukraine and Russia in a moment, but suffice it to say that they are distinct. For 6 months now, I have been arguing that the best way to understand why the war continues is because there is a disagreement between the two about the expected outcome of the conflict. This timing coincides with the relative freezing of the front lines, which has negated any concerns about Ukraine making concessions that would immediately alter the balance of power between the two. If we want to peel back one layer of the uncertainty onion, rather than stopping at saying that they have different expected outcomes, we could attempt to identify what those competing visions are. And if I were to be able to tell you as I sit here, clacking away as a keyboard warrior, which one is right, then both parties should be able to do that themselves. And then we no longer have private information, and then we should have an end to the war. So yes, I will be punting the question for the rest of this video. But I do not think that we could even be asking this question if the answer were anything other than a punt. With that, let's get to Ukraine's theory of victory. It is a bleeding strategy at the front. Ukraine's goal is to simply hold the line as best as it can. While there, Ukraine intends to impose as great of costs on Russian soldiers as possible. But because Russia is still committed to a voluntary contract system, at least for now, these costs are a secondary priority. After all, they only create a constraint on the Kremlin insofar as the Ministry of Defense must set higher wages to continue recruiting soldiers. Thus, to repeat, Ukraine just wants to hold the line with this preliminary part of its strategy. Instead, the real meat of Ukraine's strategy is now to impose costs on Russian society. This is interesting because for a couple of years, it seemed that Ukraine could not articulate a theory of victory and was fighting on the front lines without a clear purpose. That changed about a year ago when the refinery campaign, as we know it, began. Fast forward to today, and we're seeing both halves of Russian society paying the price. The government is suffering by losing out on tax revenues, which is directly costly and also has a feedback loop in limiting what Russia can muster to the front lines. Meanwhile, it is now crippling sections of the civilian society with fuel shortages, long lines, rationing, and high prices. In case it was not clear, though, whether Kyiv intended to cause a political crisis in Russia, only in the last few weeks have we seen the compelling evidence necessary to remove all doubt. A small portion of the wild berries selection was indeed for military use. Nonetheless, wholesale destroying warehouses is like using a 155mm artillery shell to kill a fly. Instead, Ukraine is using the wild berry strikes to put pressure on the consumer-focused sector of the Russian economy. It seems to be working based on all of the frustrated social media posts from ordinary Russians. To what end Ukraine is engaging in these strategies is a separate question. The light version of this is to make the war so expensive for the Kremlin that it gets second thoughts and decides that the marginal value of continuing to fight is not worth paying these elevated prices. Presumably, the parties then negotiate a settlement based on where the line of control is at that time. The stronger version is that Ukraine creates enough societal pressure that political entrepreneurs in the Kremlin consider initiating a coup against Putin, or revolutionaries form on the streets. Then you get distracted soldiers inside of Russia trying to fight a civil war and calling back their comrades from the front lines of Ukraine. That then allows Ukraine to win the war in the sense that many in the West try to envision it, where the borders return to either January 2022 or January 2014. Note here that the shadow of the strong version plays into the light version. That is, increased pressure on the regime's security makes Putin more inclined to negotiate a settlement. The risk of a coup is a de facto cost of war from his perspective. Meanwhile, Russia's theory of victory on the surface is simpler. Just take the land. And while that part sounds like a purely military consideration, it is not. Yes, strategy and tactics are a part of the equation. However, at the end of the day, wars require money and manpower, and allocating money and manpower is a political decision. Financially, the within-country situation for Ukraine is more acute. Russia knows this and is trying to exploit it. There are limits here, though, because the consensus among the public is to keep fighting. All of that palace drama from a few weeks ago was not a good look, but note that the public debate was not about whether to keep fighting the war. It was a disagreement over how best to fight the war. On the other side, the situation does not look much better for Russia. We keep hearing all of this talk of mobilization. Again, that is a political decision. Juxtaposing two theories of victory makes me feel uncomfortable. Anyone who has played competitive games, things like League of Legends or Magic the Gathering, has a fundamental understanding that part of my path to victory is making sure that my opponent's path to victory is not viable. It is the same in warfare. Consequently, we cannot really talk about one without exploring the other. Contrary to how the question was phrased, which I cannot fault the viewer for doing, I do not think that we can abandon the conversation about what is happening on the front line. Progress, or even lack of progress there, is what shapes the political decisions. That then feeds back into what is happening at the point of contact. The viewer is right that, relatively speaking, the European Union has an unlimited bank account. Whether member countries are willing to donate any of it is a different question. Put differently, the last 2 years of territorial exchange data are promising for Ukraine, and the last 6 months are even more so. But they are not the end of the story, and complacency causes this to fall apart. Regarding the bonus question at the end, what we are looking at is the business of news. You cannot get any money if no one clicks on your videos. Unlike mainstream media news outlets, which can simply cover the most important stories in the world on any given day, content creators publish within very specific spaces. These do not respond well to changes in topic. For example, a creator with a YouTube channel called Ukraine Rocks can only really get views for content about Ukraine. Given that, it does not matter whether what is happening in the world is important or not. They need to convince their viewers that it is. And they probably also need to pair that overselling with over-optimism about what is happening. I will say a couple of things that I think puts this in the proper perspective. 1, things are more important right now than what went on for likely the last couple of years, dating back to the invasion of Kursk. And 2, just because something is not super important in the context of the war does not make it uninteresting. Where I try to break from most channels that focus on this war is by avoiding the "Putin is done" trap, and instead focus on the theory behind the strategies that Russia and Ukraine are implementing. Executing a good strategy is difficult, particularly in a geopolitical context where the information that actors have both inside and outside the system is bad. If you are here to watch me talk about difficult puzzles and the way my mind goes about trying to solve them, then you are in the right place. For example, I do not think that getting completionist ++ on Balatro is particularly important for the world, but figuring out how to do it sure is interesting. Maybe you agree. Or maybe you just saw through my transparent plot to brag that I've done the completionist ++ mission on Balatro. Anyway, that seems like a good place for a mic drop. Fine. Like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you tomorrow. Take care.